Ủa gõ luôn á chị, không gõ luôn hả?
Ít nhất là cái file của tao về xong rồi phải up ngược cái file của tao lên cái file của tụi bay, xong tụi bay push nó lên cái app của tao. Nhớ không? Ý là ông nói vậy đó, ông nói nếu như mà tụi bay không làm được thì cái có cái gì ít nhất tụi bay phải cái file của tao thì sẽ up lên ngược từ. Không được, không biết này.
Chị mai em sẽ đi
Hi, Anne.
Finally, I could attend your morning section.
I'm very glad because this is really two interesting sessions, and I hope you will enjoy it.
Definitely covers governance and corporate responsibility. Like the most trending topics in research right
Yeah,
now.
absolutely. Okay, we still wait for our managers too. Morning. Okay, dear students, good morning. Let's start the class. We almost just started and it's already finished. So this is our last session today. Of course, Anne will take over next week and do lots of exercise sessions to prepare you for the exam. We have two topics left. One is corporate governance and the other is a guest lecture on private equity. And we will do both. And as Andras told you, these are really the two most hot topics in corporate finance today, both in research but also in the practical world. When I ask my students, what is your dream job? And then 5 years ago, they would say, I want to go to an investment bank, like Goldman Sachs or Citigroup. Nowadays, they would say, I want to become a private equity manager, simply because this is the hottest game in town. And private equity, what do they different? Basically, we think that the corporate governance is the key difference. It's a complete different way of managing and steering corporations. And therefore, we start really with corporate governance is. And I start with an example, and I have a specific reason for this. Last year, I brought some gifts from Germany for all the students. This year, I couldn't do it, but I just went to a large supermarket. And I saw so many German products there. Really amazing. And I have a second house in Italy on a lake, and when I see across the lake, I see a very, very big building. It's almost like the White House in Washington. And I found out who is the owner. This is the second home of the Riegel family. And Haribo is owned by the Riegel family. So Haribo, it's a very traditional, it's a typical German firm in respect to it was family owned and it is still 100% family owned 100 years later. And so it is not stock listed, it does not have agency conflicts in terms of managers who pursue their self-interest. Haribo stands for Hans. That was the first name of the founder, Riegel. And you see, Haribo was owned by the Riegel family. Hans died, I think, 20 or 30 years ago. So now his sons and his grandchildren are basically the owners. And then Bo stands for Bonn. And Bonn is the former capital of Frankfurt, of Germany. And that's where the company is located. And so I put them all here. So this is what Haribo produces. So they produce all kinds of sweets. And the interesting thing is, Vietnamese people usually think that only Vietnamese people eat things like bones. But this is animal bones. Animal bones and sugar. So the German way basically to make use of everything. And yeah, there were 10, I hope enough for everybody. Yeah, please make sure that also the other students get one. And yeah, there were different varieties, so you can basically choose your favorite. The original is a beer.
Oh, really?
The gummy beer. That is the original, and everything else came later. So, an incredibly rich family that is just producing these kinds of sweets. Many Vietnamese families also do this. So, what is the difference between Haribo and the many other companies? They basically developed into a global operation, and you can find Haribo at every large supermarket. They are producing all over the world. They are extremely professional, and they probably have much higher cost than other producers, but still are able to get much higher prices from the consumers. Of course, because it's a brand product. Probably they also do a lot of advertising. Maybe they are also a bit better than the others. I don't know. For me, it's interesting how the corporate governance is, and that is really typical German. Of course, initially it was only Hans Riegel who was the founder, the manager, and the owner. So no agency conflicts at all. When he died, of course, then the problem is always, how many sons and daughters do you have, and how do they share the management? And do they still want to be the managers, or do they hire some external managers? If they hire external managers, then of course the same kind of problem arises that we have been discussing yesterday. But still, you would say that the family is closely watching what they do. And whenever the manager is misbehaving, they would immediately intervene. And so their governance bodies is a supervisory board and an executive board. And the executive board is sometimes also called the management board. So that's where the managers are sitting, and the supervisory board is basically where the family, where the owners are sitting. Even if the owners do not work for the company, they still have a very active role, and they have access to all information, and they continuously talk with the management. So this kind of two-board system in the US, you have shareholders, you have a board that is made of inside directors, and I will call them managers, and on outside directors. And basically this board runs the firm, but these people, of course, run much more. They are full-time employees. They basically do everyday management decisions. These outside directors only come once a month, maybe. They meet with all the other board members and basically have a kind of monitoring function. This is US, and in Germany, we have the shareholders, or here in the family. They appoint the supervisory board, Basically, they say some family members, maybe some experts, a lawyer, and a banking expert sits there, and they basically then the executive board. They then elect the executive board, and this basically runs the firm. So we have a two-board system, also for stock-listed companies, and it's completely different from the United States. So these supervisory board members are basically these people, and the inside directors are the executive board members. So it's the main difference is they sit on two different boards, are more clearly separated, and the supervisory board has a clear task of supervising and not basically commingling with the others. And of course there was a hot debate, which is the best corporate governance system. Germans believe that this system is the best, and of course Americans believe that their system is the best. And then very large corporations in Germany are again very special, because 50% of these members here come from the shareholders, but another 50% are employees. Basically, employees vote for representatives, and then their representatives sit on the top level board. This means that employees have a large say on German firms. So if you want to fire people, Volkswagen, for example, is currently under stress, and they want to reduce the workforce by, I think, 10 or 20%, they talk to these employees, and they need the consent of these employees. And after the employees basically say yes to it, it is much easier it is difficult to get the consent, but once it is there, all the employees understand that these people did the best in order to get a good package. So if you are fired, they help you to get a new job, they pay you a lot of money in order to find a new job, and they pay your consultant maybe. So the German system is much more driven by consensus. We try not basically to behave like Elon Musk, who just sends an email, you are fired, but instead basically engage the employees. But again, this is only for the large corporations. Haribo doesn't have this. Haribo is a smaller firm. And then, what do they care about? In America, you would basically say these, in particular these outside directors, but also the inside directors, we have the duty of increasing the shareholder value, of increasing the share price. And in a company like Haribo, they say employees, society, environment, and products. This is basically our focus. We want to have happy customers. That's why we focus on products. We want to leave a healthy and green environment. We want to be good to society, and of course we want to have satisfied employees. They don't even talk about profits. Of course, in the back of your mind, you understand that they also need to make profits, but it's clearly not the first thing that they speak out to the public. And their long-term goals is to be a responsible business, ensuring that consumers can enjoy the products with clear conscience, that basically that is, these products must be sustainable, green, not toxic, and so forth. And basically they also say gender balance and management. You all suffer from you recognize that the scholarships for DAAD in Germany are 50% female, 50% male. That is typical. Many German corporations, without being forced, Haribo can do whatever they like. But they decided that females need to be supported more. Because traditionally there were too few females on the top levels of the board, so their policy is to improve this. And then of course they want family involvement. They basically see if you are a family member, you are not only rich, but you also have responsibility. Yeah, and the responsibility is to help Haribo to survive in the long run and to develop successfully. And then they also talk about society and other stakeholders. So this is a completely different understanding of how firms operate, and very different from the profit or shareholder maximizing model that we see predominantly in the United States. And also if you have this structure here, if the top board who makes all the decisions have 50% employees, you can guess that profit is not the most important thing in Germany. Basically, employee security, safe employment, good treatment of employees is another big goal. Of course, you can only pay high salaries and offer good employment conditions if you have enough profit. And therefore, in Germany, all these people, of course, understand that you need a good mix between profitability and employee satisfaction. But a very, very different treatment compared to many other countries. Actually, Germany is the only country that I know that have these employee representatives on the top level. That is a thing really specific to Germany. And I think it is owed to the cultural fact that Germans try to do everything in consensus. It's not that shareholders fight against employees, and whoever is more powerful basically can become a dictator. Germans tend to think that we are a team, and we do it together. So, what is corporate governance basically? Here are the most important things. Who should decide how corporate assets are used? Do we keep them? Do we sell them? And who makes sure that those people act responsibly? So these people here are extremely important. And you want the right people there. You want the right objective function. And when we see corporate misbehavior, like fraudulent behavior, of course we interpret this as a failure of corporate governance. And then we think about how can we better ensure that the top management decision making is improved by having more checks and balances, better selected people, other people. And one of the hot topics is currently, do you want their, if you think about the people that sit here, or that sit here, should that be as traditional, experienced old white men? Or should there be women and minorities? Should there be employees? Should there be customers? And these kind of questions. And then this question is, of course, a question of incentives. In the United States, there is a big question. Well, it is very clear that these people here are mainly motivated by stock options. Or you ask them to also buy a lot of stocks. So they should have high-powered incentives. They are provided with high-powered incentives. And then in the US, even those people that are neutral or supposed to be neutral to the firm, they also are paid with stock options. So they all have mainly an interest to get the stock price up. And here in Germany, this is completely different. We pay these people with stock options, but not as aggressive as the United States. And we say these people have a monitoring or controlling role. So they should be neutral. They must not be paid with stock options. It is very rare. And of course, these people get nothing. They are full-time employees. And just as a part of their work, they also sit on the board. So the incentive structure in Germany is really very, very different. And that, to a large part, explains why German corporations have a completely different management approach and focus much less on the stock price, for example. Okay, now, just two definitions that we leave out the others. The OECD, it's some kind of body. Corporate governance is the system by which business corporations are directed and controlled. So you really focus on this controlling function here, and less so on the managers. Yeah? To basically think who is selecting, yeah? Who is firing the CEO if the CEO is an asshole. Yeah? Like Elon Musk, for example. Yeah? Of course, Elon Musk cannot be fired, but yeah? If somebody is underperforming or if somebody is simply misbehaving, yeah? He's not behaving according to the ethical values of the firm. Who's making these decisions? Yeah? And of course, to fire the CEO is not easy. So you really need strong, responsible people. Yeah? And basically everything that plays a role is investigated. Yeah? Just one example, in the United States, here is of course, these inside directors include the CEO, include the CFO, and then some other people. And quite often, these people here and these people are best friends. Yeah? Or even the family. Yeah? Look at Donald Trump, he's the best example. When he founds a firm, he only puts his friends and family on the board. Yeah? So of course, that will make it impossible to fire him. Yeah? In Germany, yeah, these people are clearly independent. Yeah? And it would be unethical, basically, to put friends of the German newspapers would be extremely negative, yeah, and the reputational damage very strong, if there would be a relation between them. Yeah? Because we believe that they are a monitoring function, yeah, so they must be independent. Yeah, let's click over the other people, things here. I have selected only the most important slides for you in order to really cover both presentations on this morning. Yeah? So corporate governance matters, yeah, if there are conflicts of interest. Yeah? If these people here have their own agenda, their own objective, yeah, and maybe not the same than the shareholders have. Yeah? But even if you have conflicts of interest, if you have complete contracts, you basically can write everything in a contract. You would say the owners of the firm want the company to be sustainable. Yeah? It wants to enforce some ethical standards. If they can simply write this into a contract and that's easy to enforce, no problem. There is no conflict of interest. But of course, contracts are incomplete. You can't basically precisely define what you mean with ethical standards. You can't basically define what you mean by please maximize long-term value and do not focus on short-term results. That is impossible to write into a contract, and therefore contract incompleteness is another kind of thing. End of thing. And of course there are transaction costs, meaning yesterday we talked a bit about renegotiation. Suppose you observe everything. You have symmetric information, so you observe the manager is focusing on short-term goals, but you want him to focus on long-term goals. And of course you can enter into negotiations, maybe pay him some money and want to change his mind, and then ultimately the good thing prevails. But transaction costs basically mean that this is not easily possible. You can't easily do this. And that basically means that implicit power, the CEO, has a lot of freedom to decide on himself, and therefore the governance is really important. With Haribo, well, there still is a governance problem, because probably there are many grandchildren now that own the firm. Everybody hopes that somebody else is working hard for monitoring, is working in the management, and maybe he himself or she himself has a quiet life. And of course, if they hire outside directors, and they basically receive a fixed salary, they still have to think about, is he working hard enough? Is he working according to the family values? And even if they incentivize him, maybe they give him, well, they have no stocks, so they can't give them stock options. Maybe they say, if Haribo is profitable, we pay you a bonus. But maybe then the manager puts too much emphasis on profits. And forgets about satisfied employees. So basically, in order to incentivize him, you must measure everything that you want. And then you must have a measure of employee satisfaction, You must have a measure of profitability. You must have a measure of how the ethical standards are implied. And quite often it's difficult to measure this. So they may also have an issue here, but of course less of an issue. Yeah, and then if you think about what is really important to understand the corporate governance system of a corporation, of a company, of a whole country, it's first most the legal rules. If these people or these people can be sent to jail if they make something wrong, or if it's easy to fire them, if you find that they did something wrong, then of course these legal rules play a big role. But also the legal rules basically say what kind of information access to the people have. If you have a very, very comprehensive and high quality corporate reporting, and a police force like the Securities and Exchange Commission that makes sure that the balance sheets are honest and do not lie, then of course these people have better information on which to judge. And a country like Vietnam is well known for having, relative to the United States, a low quality of financial reports, so you may not believe precisely what's in these financial reports. Then of course you have to rely more on the judgment of insiders, and the outsiders may find it more difficult, basically, to control them. Norms in public, let's focus on this. Product market competition simply means if Haribo is no longer able to sell these little things, they may go bankrupt. And the threat of bankruptcy, of course, has an influence on the decision making. So if you have a wonderful product that satisfies the employees, that satisfies customers, that is good for the environment, but unfortunately you can't make a profit with it, then of course product market competition basically dictates a no to this product. And then takeover and proxy fights, of course. As we said yesterday and the day before, that's another kind of thing. If these people basically work and maybe very successfully work, but the share price is not what it could be. Then a corporate raider comes, buys the firm, and takes over control. So if a company basically focuses on environment or focuses on social welfare instead of share price, they are in danger. The Haribo family, of course, does not have this threat. Only if all the family members basically sell their shares, but they have a contract that basically makes this impossible. I think they usually have a contract only if all or maybe 90% of the owners agree, then this company is sold. But the intention of Hans Riegel is, of course, that this should stay a family firm for as long as possible. And then we have internal things. Ownership concentration. Elon Musk is the best example. He is so powerful simply because he's not only the CEO but also the largest shareholder of Tesla. And that changes, of course, everything. In Germany, many companies have lots of debt, and the debt is not held by small bondholders but by large banks. And famous banks like Deutsche Bank are incredibly powerful because they basically can control many companies. If they say, dear Mercedes-Benz, we don't want you to take over Chrysler because we see risks for our loans, then basically this is a no-go. They can simply cut down the credit lines. It is almost impossible for Mercedes-Benz to replace Deutsche Bank as the largest bank. Gives the German banks a very powerful position. And then we talked about who is sitting on the board, how is the board compensated, and what is the compensation and the incentive structure of these people. Okay, and now we basically go into these mechanisms a bit, and we first look at the board of directors. The most important corporate governance fact is fiduciary duty. And we discussed this in the Time Warner case. When corporation, when the CEO does not act in the interest of shareholders, he faces the risk of basically being penalized. Now you saw in the Time Warner case, this is an example where clearly the shareholders all hated the decision, but nonetheless he was not found being guilty of violating fiduciary duties. But there were many other examples where basically fiduciary duties are strict and basically impose restrictions on the behavior of corporations. And I already told you, inside and outside directors in the United States, it is not a must to have a percentage of outside directors, but it is a kind of norm. So if you would have no outside directors, shareholders would be very critical, the share price would be low. So it is almost an obligation. But these grey directors, they are a bit like this here. On paper, you would say, oh, they look like outside directors. They do not work for Tesla. But if you do some research, you realize that they are not truly outside directors. They are somehow related to the firm, and therefore can't be expected to monitor well. So there was a lot of empirical evidence, for example, looking at how do firms perform, how do firms behave, if they have different compositions of the board. Is it good to have more truly outside directors, for example? Is one of the hottest corporate governance research areas. And a lot of papers basically have been written about this. And the common belief is that you need independent, that you need truly independent outside directors that are not friends and family of the board of the CEO, and that basically can be effective checks and control for the manager. Now jump over to the next. The next big topic in the United States is stock options. Surely. Also in the United States, 50 years ago, the top executives mainly received a salary. That was, of course, more than an average salary. Maybe $1 million, maybe $2 million. But this was it. And then the Americans basically invented stocks and stock options as an incentive device. And it really started with stock options. People basically said, if you look at compensation, here in 1993, it was mostly cash. So a flat salary. And then stock and stock options was only a little, and then other is basically pension benefits. So you simply get over $1 million plus a nice pension package, and only a small amount of stock options. And look today, the biggest part is really stock options. So companies basically realize, or shareholders realize, that if you provide more stock options, it is more likely that the company is performing well and that the stock price is shooting up. By the way, in the class of Fabian, you will learn that the value of an option is a function of the current stock price. If you can bring the current stock price up, then of course the option increases in value and the manager becomes rich. It is of course a function of K, the strike price of the option, the interest rate, the time to maturity, and now comes the most important thing, the volatility. When you bring the risk up, the value of your option increases. So this is not only an incentive to increase the share price, it is also an incentive to increase the risk. And that is of course something that at least in Germany people see extremely critical. Because in Germany we think risk is something that should be prevented. If you plan for the long run, if you want to be sustainable, you should not incentivize the people to take on big bets. Americans are different. They say, if we have one Google and 10 bankrupt companies, that's okay. The bankrupt companies will simply dissolve and the people all go to Google. And that is our desired outcome. They are much more risk-loving than the Germans. And the effect that the risk and the volatility is really a function of the option price is an important incentive device.
ask a question?
Sure.
So in Germany, so what is the proportion of long-term executive payment, for example, stock option, grants compared to the short-term incentives like cash bonus?
But the large German corporations today all also have stock options. I think the difference between Germany and America, and again there was lots of research about this, yes. First of all, our stock options are a bit smaller. Yeah? In America, sometimes 70 or 80% of your earnings come from stock options. In Germany, we try to make this a smaller component. Yeah? The other thing is, if you issue a stock option at time 0, yeah, then basically you have 2 more days. Yeah? You have the vesting period. Yeah? And basically that means you can exercise your option. Yeah? So usually here we have a 2-year period where you can't exercise your stock options. Yeah? So even if you bring the share price up, you simply can't exercise the stock option, take the money and run away. Yeah? In Germany, this is quite high. This is quite high, yeah, in order to make this more longer run. And the biggest difference, even after exercise, you cannot basically sell the share. After exercising the stock options, you become a share owner. Yeah, and in Germany, basically we say, and this share must stay in your portfolio for the next 10 years. Yeah, and then, of course, the manager really has a long-term interest. Yeah, so if you can only push up the share price for a short period of time, yeah, that is not, he cannot become rich for this. Yeah, so the detailed design of these stock option packages really differ from country to country, from company to company, yeah, and the design really focuses on how strong the incentives are and whether there were incentives for short-term pushing up the stock price and so forth. Yeah, but that's all nitty-gritty details, yeah, and we.
Very interesting, you say different settings.
Yeah.
Is there any research, I'm just curious, is there any research into the relationship between executive compensation in Germany and the corporate governance mechanism for share price? I think it's like kind of very different from the US setting.
Well, we have something called the European Corporate Governance Institute, yeah, and they really do massive amounts of work on all these issues. And of course, well, ideally we would simply want to understand, yeah, if you have 5 different examples of compensation, yeah, then we would basically find, yeah, what impact does this have on the share price in the long run, and what impact does it have on employee satisfaction, for example, or on other things. If you measure this, there was so much noise in the data. Yeah, it is difficult to really identify the causal effect of this thing. Yeah? But you've been talking with, next year you will talk with Ulrich Schüber in the last class on how to really identify, and identify is an econometric term. Yeah? You want to establish a causal relationship, you understand actually what effect did this compensation package or corporate governance structure has on long-term stock prices, yeah? And then you basically see if there was too much noise in the data, if there are endogeneity problems, confounding effects, yeah? There are all kinds of reasons why it is difficult to really have a proof, basically, an economic proof that is robust. So there is a lot of basically research on this, but everything that goes beyond 5 years, I think it's, well, I think the noise in these data is just too high now to find a good difference. What you can find is basically if you look at short-term behavior, yeah, for example, overinvestment. Yeah, you are investing too much money. Yeah, you can easily see, yeah, after you change the compensation package, yeah, you see a change in the investment policy of the firm. Yeah, and then causality is easier to establish. Yeah, so in the end, the big thing is, can you have a good identification? If you have one group, if you have two groups of firms that are basically the same, yeah? One is changing the compensation structure, the other is not. and then immediately after the change, you find a change in corporate behavior. Then basically you are confident that this is the result of the compensation structure. But this kind of ideal observation, this ideal data situation, is very rare. And therefore you always have at least a number of competing hypotheses why you observe what you observe. And you usually can't conclude that because of the compensation design, that is the stock price increased or decreased. Let's go to another corporate governance mechanism. So the United States basically rely on the board composition and the stock options that they provide to the managers, but they also rely on ownership concentration. And Tesla is again the best example. But also Google and Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg owns only a small proportion of Facebook, but due to multiple voting rights, his shares have 10 voting rights, while other shares have only 1 voting right. So he has much more power than the others, and he basically can dominate. He's a dictator. I think he has more than 50% of all Facebook voting rights. And that is not an ownership concentration, that is basically a voting right concentration. And the Haribo example, of course, the family has all the votes. And this is again a very small group of people that know each other. And you see Germany, even if you see companies like Volkswagen or BMW, they are large firms listed on the stock market, you can buy their stock, but the majority of their shares is like Haribo in the hands of the family. BMW is the Quandt family living in Frankfurt, close by. I think the richest family in Germany, a big donator of our university, by the way. And Volkswagen, of course, is owned by the Porsche family still today, and they really dominate. And this is, of course, something that makes sure, well, if these families also manage the firm, like in the case of Elon Musk, then of course you can hope that the manager really works in the interest of shareholders. But again, Haribo would say, this is not what we want. In America, basically shareholders want the managers to work hard and to increase the share price. In Germany, you also want the managers to work hard, but also to behave in an ethical manner, to basically think about sustainability and long-term survival more than just the share price. But if you have these, then you see many European corporations, and that's very different to the United States. Nasdaq and NYSE are the two US stock exchanges. So the Anglo-Saxon countries, UK and USA, basically have almost no concentrated ownership. So Tesla and Facebook and Google is really the exception. Most companies have widely dispersed ownerships, and therefore every stock shareholder is a rather small shareholder. He has no reason basically to closely monitor, and if he sees something, of course he can, but he has no power. He has just a few votes. His votes will not affect the outcome, and therefore you can expect these shareholders to be more or less passive. So the Anglo-Saxon world relies much more on corporate raiders, on the takeover mechanism. If something is wrong, the raider will fix it. In Europe, when something is wrong, the family will detect it, and the family members fix it. And now we go into some theory. All this corporate governance topic is a hot research topic, and there were basically the empirical literature and the theoretical literature. The theoretical literature basically it does modeling and provides testable hypotheses, and then the empirical guys test these hypotheses, and then they say the results are consistent with this or that theory. So modeling is important, basically, to sharpen our mind and think what is really going on, what are the clearly defined effects. And this is really not a model, it's just the introduction to a model. And I just show you how this is modeled, and it's very similar to what you saw already. So, as we saw, basically, the corporation is supposed to produce security benefits. That's basically the dividend. And think about a very simple thing. You found the firm today, G0, and then at one day in the future, the return comes out. And the apples are harvested, and X is just the amount of apples that this firm will be producing. And well, if phi is 0, then basically the value of the firm. The value of the firm goes to the security holders. But unfortunately, somebody can simply steal a proportion of this. And phi is basically the private benefits. And the idea is there was a farmer, he grows an apple tree. This apple tree belongs to 1,000 different shareholders. The farmer takes the apples up and down from the tree when harvesting, and he simply eats some of them. This is a private benefit, and only the rest is left over for the shareholders. And then the shareholders basically have the task of preventing the manager to eat too many apples. And then the question is, how many apples does the farmer wants to eat? And the theory basically said, the more he eats, the better off he is. So he would like to eat all the apples. But then there was a law and some legal constraints. And if he eats more than phi tilde, he is basically put into prison. So he can eat some of the apples, but no more than some maximum amount. It's extremely simplified, and of course the real models are much more elaborated. It's just the most, it's the dramatically easiest way to model this. And then let's assume that monitoring can reduce the amount of proceeds that the manager can freely allocate to himself. So if one of the shareholders basically stands beneath the apple tree, looks what the farmer is doing, this farmer will eat no apples or less apples, but this cost, there is monitoring costs. And then the question is, of course, why should somebody pay the monitoring costs? And if you can write a contract, that's no problem. You can simply, well, the shareholders could simply hire somebody, says, please do the monitoring, we pay you for this, and then he sends a bill. But by assumption, all this is non-contractable. So it is hard to distinguish somebody that just sits there and do nothing, and one that is really monitoring. So by assumption, and you can't simply write a contract to do this, you have to incentivize somebody to really do the monitoring. And so the assumption is both phi and m are not contractable. You can simply write, if you can write a contract, dear farmer, please set phi to 0. Don't eat apples. All the apples belong to the shareholders. You can't write this into a contract. And you also can't write it into a contract that somebody basically exercises a certain amount of monitoring in order to prevent this. And so if you have small shareholders, many small shareholders, then basically everybody decides that it's rational for him also to monitor. And the idea is very simple. If you monitor, you pay all of the costs, but you get only a small fraction of the benefits. So there was a free rider problem, and with dispersed ownership, basically m is 0, and then the manager, of course, eats whatever he is allowed to eat, without going to jail, and sets the cost with the maximum amount of apples that he diverts. So the result is a widely held company that do not have large shareholders, basically has a value. This is basically the stock market value, and it is the apple tree minus the apples eaten by the manager. So there is upside potential. And now suppose there is a concentrated ownership structure. So here comes Elon Musk, and Elon Musk owns alpha of the shares, yeah, maybe 50%. Yeah? And what does he do? He basically say, when I set the monetary decision, yeah, if I monitor, of course I pay, yeah, and this is my cost. Yeah? But I also receive a benefit from monitoring. Yeah? This is with monetary zero, this is what I get. Yeah? 50% of the times V. Yeah? This is the value of without monitoring. Yeah? But if I monitor, I can basically reduce, yeah, the apples stolen by the manager, and this gives me an increase. Yeah? But I can only get alpha, yeah? Only 50% of the benefit, but I pay 100% of the costs. Yeah? And then just differentiate this in respect to m. Yeah? So differentiation of this here is alpha times phi times v, yeah, this here. And then if you set the first order condition to 0, yeah, the derivative of this here is simply m. Yeah, that's why we always do 1/2 of m squared, yeah, just in order to make sure that if you take the derivative, it's simply m. Yeah? So it's just a very simple model to show, yeah, m, the optimal amount of monitoring that Elon Musk is doing, is a function of 3 things. Yeah? What is the value of the firm? Yeah? A bigger apple tree will receive more monitoring than a small apple tree. Yeah? If you have a bigger share in the firm, you will monitor more. Yeah? Because, well, for obvious reasons. Yeah? And of course, the legal constraints also play a role. Yeah? If you have a very good legal system that basically effectively prevents the managers from stealing apples, yeah, you don't need to monitor as much. Yeah? So it's a very stupid, simple model, yeah, but it gives you 3 empirical predictions. Yeah? The predictions are that there is more monitoring if alpha, phi, or v is higher. Yeah? So large firms like Tesla with a large alpha, yeah, and firms in the United States with a small phi are expected to have more monitoring. Yeah? And this is nice, yeah, because this gives the empirical research ideas on how to do research. Yeah? So you may say the model is really oversimplified, yeah, but still it's worth to give you a structure. Yeah? And of course this is just the entry of our modeling world, yeah, that adds more and more things to it. Yeah? And they all start with the same structure like this, yeah? And then add all kinds of different things to it.
I think every model starts from very simplified assumptions.
Yeah, when you introduce models to students, they will basically say, this is theory, this is so abstract, yeah, it is so far away from reality, yeah, that you don't understand why this is actually good for anything. Yeah? Of course, but economists basically think that you always start with the simplest model possible. Yeah? That basically just, the only task of the model is basically to sharpen your intuition. Yeah? Of course, the theory is not there to predict the temperature on the next day. Yeah? If you predict the temperature, you have large mathematical models with lots of variables into it. Yeah? But we only want to understand, yeah, what factors drive the effectiveness of the monitoring mechanism, yeah? And then this is already enough. Yeah? And we don't mind, yeah, if this is oversimplified. Yeah, so basically the large shareholder, yeah, by monitoring basically reduces, yeah, the amount of apples stolen by the manager, and then there is an extra basically benefit from monitoring from this model. and then of course, you have less taken away. Yeah, because 1 minus m basically means that the shareholders benefit from monitoring. Yeah, so this model also explains why a company like Tesla, ceteris paribus, is worth more, yeah, than Tesla with only small shareholders. Yeah, of course, the stake alpha is important. Yeah, the bigger the stake, the more effective the monitoring will be. If you have a weak legal system that allows the managers basically to steal a large part of corporate assets, And people think about Italy in particular, because Italy is just well known to have a weak corporate governance system where, well, I think the truth is Italians just trust each other. Italians basically believe that every director is a criminal, every politician is a criminal, and that basically they steal corporate assets. And of course there are also examples, but I believe they are a bit exaggerated. It's just that the Italian tradition is basically a tradition of distrust in the powerful. And politicians and managers are both powerful people, so you basically have a deep belief that they misbehave, and then you would say Italy has a large pie, it allows managers to steal a lot of apples, and then of course you find this. Then they need controlled ownership. And if you look into the evidence, of course, and you see Italy is here, the majority of the firms have large shareholders that monitor, and you see, okay, this is exactly what I expected. If you believe that these three countries have very good legal systems that basically sends the people to jail when they steal apples, then you understand why they don't need large shareholders. And that's how people basically discuss this kind of evidence. They think about, is this consistent with the large shareholder population? Even the firm with the large shareholder still is far away from the first best. The first best is always when you set alpha to 0, to 1. Suppose Haribo, they own 100%, with 100% monitor, with 100% ownership, you basically have no external effects anymore. Here you have under provision, as long as alpha is smaller than 1, you always have the problem that the monitor bears 100% of the cost, but receives only alpha percent of the benefits. So in equilibrium, you will have less monitoring than is optimal from the first best point of view. And the Haribo family basically has no external effects. Always think about these external effects. All shareholders would agree that there is more monitoring, but the large shareholder basically doesn't have an incentive to exercise this optimal amount. So alpha of 1 is optimal. It creates the maximum welfare for all. But this of course means that you have no shareholders. That you don't have a shareholder system. Let's see. An interesting debate in the United States is that it is usually not Elon Musk who is the large shareholder, but it is usually institutional shareholders. I think the most well-known name, BlackRock, is the largest investment firm of the world. They basically, that's just enormous. And they are quite often the largest shareholder of many corporations. I think in Germany, all the DAX 30 largest corporations, they all have BlackRock as the largest or one of the largest shareholders. And now if you think, if they are the shareholders, usually we believe they profit if they monitor, because then the share price goes up. But what is the profit of BlackRock? BlackRock is just an asset management firm. The share price increase goes to the investor, goes to me. I invest my money at BlackRock. They buy some shares of Siemens for me. They are the largest Siemens shareholders. If they monitor, I benefit, not them. Because they just get a management fee, which is a small amount of money. So the problem is, who monitors the monitor? If I am the ultimate beneficiary of this, I would basically ask to BlackRock, please do the monitoring, yeah, because I benefit from this, and BlackRock will simply say, why should we do monitoring? Yeah, we have only costs, we have absolutely no benefit from this. Yeah, because we are not shareholders, we are only an agent, yeah, that is paid for basically owning the shares. Yeah? So institutional investors like pension and mutual funds, yeah, they basically have employees, and these employees are paid a normal salary, and they have absolutely no reason, yeah, to basically spend their time with monitoring. So large shareholders basically are only large shareholders in the sense of the theory if they personally benefit from monitoring, yeah, like Elon Musk. Yeah, but these people here are employees of pension funds, and they do not personally benefit. So the insight is, yeah, that these pension funds, yeah, they are large shareholders, but it is not enough. Only if we can basically, the Americans then say, yeah, but if we have a legal system, yeah, where we threaten these people with jail or with penalties, if they do not monitor, maybe this is enough, yeah, and then they start monitoring. But honestly, I don't believe that crap. When I talk to BlackRock people, they basically say, BlackRock is a huge computer, yeah, where many people invest their money in, and then the money flows to all the corporations, and we spend almost no time on basically looking at the corporations. Yeah, BlackRock is well known for the ETFs. That is the biggest ETF provider, and ETF basically means just a computer buys things like the S&P 500 shares or the DAX 30 shares and so forth. And they look at cost, yeah, they are the cheapest in the world, and they don't want to incur monitoring costs.
That's very true. They may hire some external policy voting companies to like analyze the policy voting, but they institutional shareholders actually don't care much about corporate governance of monitoring.
It's an interesting thing. There was a company called Institutional Shareholder Service.
ISS or the last few years.
This is a non-government, basically non-profit organization, funded by people who really think that they have to cure this, that they basically donate money to this, and they basically say, okay, then we monitor, and then we do recommendations, and then we basically recommend BlackRock on how to vote, and hopefully this will cure this problem. Yeah, very good point. So Americans think a lot about how can we motivate our pension funds and our BlackRocks in order to basically make the right decisions when it comes to company votings. Yeah, and of course the easiest thing is to basically to give the manager equity. Before we basically said there was a large shareholder, and there is the director. So Elon Musk was not a good example. The model so far was basically there was a large shareholder, but he is not the manager, and he monitors the manager. Elon Musk is somehow both. I think primarily he's a shareholder, but he also works. Yeah, of course, he also works. He's the CEO of Tesla. So the last thing was really more like the Haribo family. The Haribo family is a large shareholder. There is an independent manager, and the Haribo family monitors him closely because they would suffer in their shareholdings because they have such a large shareholder. But here, of course, the owner and the manager is the same person. So somebody like Elon Musk, he owns 50% of the corporation, but he is also the one who receives the private benefits. Elon Musk is probably have a nice corporate jet, and that jet is paid by Tesla. He basically paid 50% of the jet, and 50% was paid by the other shareholders. So if you think, does it make sense to use this jet or to force Tesla to buy the jet? He basically said, I get 100% of the benefits. I am the user of this jet, but they also pay 50% of this. So in this little model here, basically, the idea is that a part phi can again be stolen by the manager. Yeah, think about this apple tree. Yeah, 100% of the apples usually would belong to the shareholders. Yeah, but phi, maybe 20%, are just taken away, set aside by the manager. Yeah? And then here is something new. Yeah, the private benefits usually would say, okay, I can eat 20% of the apples. Yeah, so phi times b is my benefit. But here it is modeled as a function, and this function is basically not only this, yeah, but also we subtract something. And the idea is, if you steal more and more corporate resources, yeah, then your benefit may be less than the dollar amount, but there were complex stories to tell behind it. Yeah? There was something that basically restricts or makes smaller the amount that you can get. Yeah? So, suppose this is here not there, yeah? Then you would say x plus z is equal to b. Yeah, because 80% of the apples go to the shareholders, 20% of the apples go to the manager, yeah, but society is well off. Yeah, society receives 100% of the apples. Yeah, and if society allows many apples to be stolen, yeah, that is not a welfare impact. Yeah, because still society as a whole has 100% of the apples. Yeah? If you subtract something here, that means society is worse off. Yeah, if you allow stealing apples. Yeah, and the idea is that the whole system is a bit, stealing is of course not so easy. So Elon Musk would actually prefer to have a nice island for making holidays, but he can't simply ask Tesla to buy this island for him. Yeah, so instead he buys an airplane. Yeah, but the airplane is not really what he wants. Yeah, so basically this is a cost basically of stealing assets. And that is the idea. Yeah? So there was an increasing deadweight loss. Yeah? This is something that deadweight loss is just a term for welfare is reduced. Yeah? If you allow more of this, this is not. This is reducing basically the welfare of the whole society, yeah? Including shareholders and managers. And now this I, which is now called the manager, who's also a large owner. Yeah, it's got here an insider. Yeah, let's think about I being Elon Musk. Yeah, he basically receives alpha times the security benefits. Yeah, so this part here times B is what he receives as a shareholder. Yeah, but then he also receives this part from stealing the apples. Yeah, but with this deadweight loss including. Yeah, and he will choose the number of apples stolen, yeah, by differentiating in respect to phi, and we'll set this to 0, and then phi is 1 minus alpha. So very easy. If alpha is 1, phi is 0. Yeah, if he is like Haribo, yeah, he realizes stealing does not make sense. Yeah, I can pay the apple out in full as a dividend. If I eat it, I get only a smaller part of the apple, yeah, because here this is this deadweight loss. Yeah, but whenever alpha is not equal to 1, yeah, as we have with Tesla and almost all corporations, then of course we still, it's the higher the alpha is, the better. Yeah? So small, large shareholders, Elon Musk should own as many shares as possible. Yeah? Of course, there is a limitation. Yeah? If you think about, can we simply write a law? Yeah? Elon Musk must hold 100% of the equity, like Hans Riegel did for Haribo. It is impossible with Tesla. Elon Musk is already the richest man, but he owns only I don't know what percentage, maybe 20% of Tesla. Yeah? Tesla is simply too large to be owned by one person. Yeah? And therefore, you will compromise basically. You can only choose between second best or between worse than optimal solutions. Yeah, and you see again here, Jensen-Mettling. Yeah, this is basically the origin of this law. Yeah, Jensen-Mettling led a full generation of professors to basically think in these terms. Yeah, and that's why this article from '76 has become so popular and so important. Okay, now let's jump over some slides in order to go down. Yeah. Luigi Zingales is really a very, very prominent guy. He is from Italy, so he comes from a country where everybody deeply believes that you can't trust other people. And he is really the worst of all. He basically believes that all managers are criminals. But at the same time, he is the most influential writer on corporate governance issues. He is living in Chicago, one of the leading professors at the University of Chicago. Chicago is the #1 university worldwide for finance, and in particular corporate finance. So Luigi Zingales' opinions really count for many, many people. When he writes an article, many, many people in the world read these articles. And these slides are basically from him. So the next slides are basically his slides, how he teaches his American students. And basically he says there was an upward drift in companies' behavior. When Trump says, make America great again, then Luigi Zingales would say, yes, America indeed has a big problem. It was great when it was like Hollywood. But now it is corrupted, corrupted by bad governance. And then he basically says, what has corrupted America? And Jensen-Mettling would say, this was the solution, but Luigi Zingales this is the problem. And he basically says, once we started to provide high-powered incentives to managers, basically managers concentrated only on share prices. They forgot, like Haribo, about employees, about society as a whole, about many other things. No surprise that they act like criminals. And for example, excessive risk-taking is something. But there are many other examples that Luigi would have in order to say. So, when he shows, percentage of stock-based compensation has increased to more than 70%, compared to 0 for a long time. And basically said America has changed, and if there is something to criticize, it's basically the negative effects from this huge amount of stock-based compensation. And then he says our CEOs earn way too much. They used to start some 1 million or so. They were at 5 million in 1990, and now they are already at 15 million every year. So basically his idea is that there is a small elite of CEOs that basically enrich themselves at the cost of other people. And and then he continues to say various forces, and has caused this upward drift of things. So high-powered incentives was one part, but then fiduciary duties is another part. In the end, if the CEO says, I want this strategy, it's high risk, it is very dangerous for the society. Best example, I'll show you an example. this is a picture of a this is a well-known picture in Europe. It's a waterway in Italy, in Milano, and you see it collapsed. 43 people were killed, and this bridge was operated by a private company. And what everybody knows, what was actually in the financial statement, everybody knew that there was a high risk that this would collapse. And the board of directors did nothing, the CEO did nothing. The CEO did nothing because they said, if we do this, it costs a lot, the share price will go down, I am paid by stock options, so I prefer to do nothing. And then the question is, why did all the other board members also say yes to this? And Luigi Zingales basically says, this is because of fiduciary duties. So he basically says, all the other people, these people here, the outside directors, they should basically think about this and basically force the company to look at safety. This is a high-risk strategy. If you are lucky, this is basically high risk. If you are lucky, you earn a lot of money. But if you are unlucky, basically many people are killed, the share price collapses, and so forth. And then, Delaware, as usual, we saw in the time case, Delaware is the preferred state where most corporations are incorporated. So Delaware law basically is the most important law how corporations behave. And the Delaware law has evolved into the shareholder value maximization. Basically, if you do something that is not good for shareholder value, as an outside director, you are threatened with penalties. An outside director has no problem as long as he can make sure that whatever he does is good for the shareholder value. And then think about this bridge. The decision is, should we spend millions to make this bridge secure? If we do so, our share price will fall down. Because all the projections are that our profit will go down, the shareholders don't like this, share price will go down. And then basically, I would say, if we have voted to the opposite, we may have violated our fiduciary duties. Shareholders could basically sue us and force us to basically do what our CEO also does, and basically not do any repairs. And this is basically a change in the legal system. The legal system has evolved basically to force people to look at the share price, and therefore these outside directors are no longer effective monitors. As soon as something is threatening the share price, basically they are forced to stay passive. So this is, I think, one of the biggest threats. And then another kind of thought experiment. Suppose this company would behave in a socially optimal way. So it pays a lot to repair the bridges and to make the motorways safe. Some corporate raider observes this and sees that you can increase the share price by simply stopping these repairs, by running a higher risk strategy. And he makes a takeover offer and offers a nice premium. Then what do these, what do the shareholders do? And do these outside directors basically recommend this? These shareholders are quite often pension funds or BlackRock. And BlackRock now has to choose between say no, then the share price is maybe 100 and stays there. If they say yes, then they get the tender offer share price of 150. How can the manager of BlackRock basically say, no, we prefer the 100? Actually, we are convinced that 100 is the better choice, because we need secure waterways, and this 150 is basically a gamble on the security and should never be undertaken. But the shareholder, even if they care about social objectives, they will nonetheless tender, and the reason is that they have a mandate to maximize shareholder value, If they don't do, they can be sued and in prison. Yeah? So, yeah, another very important theoretical model where Hart and Zingales basically operate that even if but the shareholders the shareholders prefer this one. Yeah? This is what the shareholder wants, simply because the shareholder is also a car driver. Yeah? We all are the shareholders. Yeah? If you think about who's the ultimate shareholder, it is the society. Yeah? If everybody invests into the market portfolio, all Italian people have some savings, they all are the owners of that bridge. Yeah? And they basically can choose between a high share value and the risk of being killed, and a safe environment and a lower share price. Yeah? And suppose that the shareholders really want, they prefer the safe bridge. Yeah? But they have saved their shares with BlackRock. Yeah? And BlackRock managers have fiduciary duties. You can sue them if they say, I prefer this. Then the BlackRock managers basically make the wrong choice. That is the model of Hart and Zingales, and one of the arguments why American capitalism is not optimal in the corporate governance today. And then they bring a lot of examples where really shareholders prefer this one. If the shareholder is also a car driver, if shareholders also care about society, they will try to force companies to not only think about profit and share value, but also about other things. There were many motions, that means attempts to change the corporate policy that are really directing to other things. Here, for example, contributions to candidates of parties and committees. So somebody wants to prevent that corporations lobby Donald Trump, and then receive something back, because shareholders, of course, think a country without lobbying is a better country than with lobbying. But U.S. corporations lobby a lot, and it may be in the interest of the shareholders, because if you bribe the government, you get something in return. But of course, shareholders overall basically said, we prefer to live in a country without this kind of bribing. So there are things, there are many other examples where shareholders basically try to do something better. And in this example, they are not successful. The fiduciary duties basically make this impossible. And there were only few examples where it actually happened. So ExxonMobil, the largest oil explorer of the world, they had an activist hedge fund, and he was successful. And basically, Exxon is now becoming greener. They wanted basically to maximize profits. The shareholders said, we don't want to maximize profits. We want Exxon to be more sustainable, more greener. And when you read this in the first place, you said, well, they argue and for a lower share price. How the hell can they succeed? But they got 50% support. So there was kind of surprise. And it basically says, maybe corporate America is really changing. Maybe maybe they will learn that profit and share price is not the only thing. And this is the CEO of BlackRock, Larry Fink, well-known guy, the CEO of the largest asset manager of the world, and he basically contribute to society, or risk losing support. This is the key message that he sends to corporations. He tries, he seems to be of the same opinion than Luigi Zingales. He basically thinks we must turn the corporate governance of American companies around, and force them to focus more on society as on corporate profits. But again, don't forget that this kind of problem, the fiduciary duties, basically are strong impediments, and that's why maybe they change the law of fiduciary duties in the future in order to make this happen. Yeah, the Germans, of course, as you realize, the Germans always had this kind of example in mind, and German corporations suffer to a much smaller extent from this kind of thing. And yeah, but we watch this, of course, with great interest. And it's a very, very interesting and hotly debated literature. Okay, so this was the first part of today's presentation, and we do a little break, maybe 10 minutes, and then I will tell you what private equity firms do.